Oh, thank you. It's just wonderful to be here, and I appreciate the fishing plug as well. Just wanted to give a little bit more background about myself. I went to college in Minneapolis, to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, where I studied fine arts. I studied product and industrial design, I think which I shared in one of my morning sessions. But I think I had one class that had the most impact on my life, and that class was creative problem solving. I'm still friends with my professor to this day because he gave me that look. And you know how professors will give you the look like, yeah, I'm giving you an A, but you can do better. This isn't your best work. And I think I got maybe a B+ in that class, but it took a few years for all of those lessons of looking at problems as opportunities, the glass half full, glass empty. It really shaped my philosophy on moving forward. Because specifically, there was a project where I didn't have any money. You're in college, how are you going to have money? And I gave that as an excuse. I said, well, I really didn't have any money to do a good project. And that's when the look came in. So I really took that to heart and didn't want to have excuses for not being able to succeed with projects, including financial. And I went to the College of Art and Design for 5 years and graduated with a major in exactly. But I was really fortunate because I found my dream job right after college. And how many people can say that right after you're done with college, you find your dream job? But I was one of those lucky people. Okay, it's not what it looks like. Okay, it's exactly what it looks like. I sold shoes at Buster Brown Shoes, and it gets worse. It was in a mall. So my good friend, college roommate, Keith, actually walked by. I told no one I worked at this Buster Brown shoe store, and he walked by and just kind of gave a look like, oh, yeah, you're working at Buster Brown Shoes. Big dreamer, gonna go do art things, yeah. So I worked at Buster Brown Shoes for a little bit, but that was only so I could really get into my dream job. Okay, I worked at Buster Brown so I could buy ladders and painting equipment to start a house painting business, which I did for 2 years. I learned about entrepreneurship, I learned about managing employees, and I worked really hard painting houses. And that was so I could find my dream house in the country so I could really do the arts experience in rural America and found my dream house. A little bit of a fixer-upper. It had no doors, plumbing, windows, or electricity, but I was able to buy it for $10,000. That was my first real negotiation. It was listed for $20,000, but when I talked with the realtor's assistant, I said, you know, how long has this property been on the market? She said, oh, 4 years. Why do you ask? That's all the information I need. I've got $10,000 today. Tomorrow it's going to be $9,997 because I got to buy a hamburger. So take it or leave it offer. So they took it. Wasn't really easy. This was the inside of the house. I ran out of money 3 different times. To make money in the community, I painted barns, I painted garages, I did whatever I could to make money. And people knew me not as some change agent or artist. They knew me as the guy that would scamper up 40 feet on a ladder and paint a barn. They knew me as the guy that would get the 99-cent breakfast special because I was dressed in painting clothes and didn't have a lot of money. And so as I was painting houses and barns and getting to know people in the country, I learned that dinner was at noon, not at 6 o'clock, things like that. And got to learn people's hopes and dreams and aspirations for the community. And I learned that arts was a big part of that. Poetry, opera, fine art. These were the conversations that I would have up on ladders and down having dinner. And I just thought it just wasn't fair that people in a small town didn't have the same access as in Minneapolis. And I couldn't quite figure out what to do about that, but I wanted to do something. And then I had my aha moment. That's right. A friend gave me this toy plastic tractor, the same friend who walked by me at that Buster Brown shoe store. And I thought, of course, this is it. Everything came together. The tractor would be the logo for the New York Mills Arts Retreat. Its mission, provide innovative access to the arts. And the goal, simple, just become a national model for rural art and economic development. How hard can it be? So I formed a board of directors with the same people in the community that I painted houses for in Barnes, the local banker, local hog farmer. They were all on the board of directors. And the idea was, how do you invite artists to have a different type of experience? I researched other artist residency programs, and they're mostly started by very wealthy people who made a bequest. And I thought, well, I'm not wealthy. I don't know anyone like that. Why not do something different? So instead of having an artist colony, why not offer an experience for one artist, perhaps from an urban area, to have an experience in a rural community and to create a win-win scenario where that small town could learn from that artist and that artist could learn from the small town, creating that win-win situation. So that's what we did. And so in a town of 972, which was New York Mills' population when I moved there, I just thought, you can't afford to really use demographics to define your audience in the art, so the audience has to be everyone. And if the audience is everyone, how do you think about your programs to get that access and community buy-in? I just thought the more you can build those collaborative relationships and partnerships, the stronger that connection will be. And after 3 years, that was the renovated farmhouse. It was actually our very first artist in residence. She was from France. My French is not so good, so apologies for my pronunciation of Montpellier in France. She came, she had just walked the desert, the Gobi Desert, as part of an arts project, and she came with just one little satchel. That was all of her paint materials and one change of clothes that she washed every day, because she was very, very Spartan. And she saw me looking at a building on Main Street one day. And she said, John, I see how you look at this building. Why don't you ask for a donation? And I thought, you know, I had been looking at that building. It's the oldest brick building in New York Mills. It was abandoned. Bricks were falling off the back of it. I had heard that the owner was interested in donating it. So I approached the owner about a donation. But I negotiated maybe a little bit differently. So by the time the negotiation was over, he actually paid us $12,000 to take the building, because the first time he offered it, I had already heard that he was looking to donate it somewhere, so that, okay, well, that's easy. So I ended up talking with his wife, who I learned was a big art supporter. So after the lunch, he finally said, okay, here's $12,000 in the building, please, just take it. So he said yes. The city of New York Mills also gave $35,000 to the project, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was equivalent of a city like Calgary giving $12 million to a project. And in fact, it did not just go that easily. I spent 2 years attending city council meetings while I was painting barns and houses to learn about the city council, and so they'd be comfortable with me when we finally did ask. And in fact, one member of the city council said, you know, all I've heard about this cultural center project are negative things. What do you have to say? I said, well, it just so happens we had done a membership campaign in the community for this and had a list of 100 community members who had already supported the project, including the father of the newspaper publisher, who was the first person who signed up. So I said, well, here's 100 people in the community who disagree with that. And the city finally said yes. In objection, the economic developer that the city had objected to it. Said, no, this is not going to work. This is going to cost $250,000 to do. You didn't know anything about this kind of a thing. It's not going to work. And in fact, can the city even give that much money? You have to bond for this. So anticipating that question, I'd already done research about if a city could actually give that kind of a financial contribution to a project. Pulled out the Minnesota state statute that clearly said a municipality can give money to a cultural project without bonding. Handed that piece of paper to the economic developer, who then was speechless for the rest of the meeting as the city passed the amendment and the motion to give $35,000. It did a couple of things. Not only did it help us achieve our capital campaign goal, the city was now invested in the project. Now, I'll be honest, I pitched the project as a very risky proposition. Now, this happened to be the inspection day where the mayor decided to look at the building, and the contractor had just ripped off the entire roof, which needed to be replaced. So I reassured the mayor it was going to be fine. He was not buying it at the time. Again, Everything needed to be gutted. It had a second floor with 10-foot ceilings. The ceilings were so bad, you could touch them. There was a kid's swimming pool that was used to collect water that drained out onto another building. That's how bad the building was. But people started coming around. We had over 2,000 volunteer hours go into the project. And one of the naysayers was initially the person that owned the hardware store. We used that money that the city gave to hire all local contractors. That experience I had painting houses, now I was the general contractor and hired all local contractors, so that money went directly back into the community. And that had a ripple effect of positivity of like, oh, you know, this really is something going on here. And it's the original brick building in the community. So the project was on time, under budget. 2,000 volunteer hours went into it, including 2 days before the center opened. The local gas station owner told his employees he paid them not to work at the gas station. He paid them to volunteer to help finish the cultural center. It was getting closer. The superintendent left school to help paint. The mayor was helping paint woodwork right up until it opened. And that same naysaying economic developer who said it wouldn't work wanted to do a survey. Say, okay, do people really support this in the community? Along with an economic survey of a baseline a year before the cultural center opened and 5 years each year subsequent. I thought, that's fantastic. What a great idea. Let's do that. Let's see its economic impact. So the year before we opened the center, city sent a survey out. 67% of the people said, city shouldn't give any money to the project. Our board was, oh my gosh, what do we do? I said, this is not a problem. This is a perceived problem. Let's worry about real problems like finishing the construction. And I guarantee you, once it opens, that's going to change. And that's the transformation of the exterior of the building. We also created an atrium. So not only was it a gallery, it was a performing arts space as well. So there was seating on the second floor for music events and classroom spaces as well. So we had art classes, including one very interesting person who was 6 years old who took their very first art class at New York Mills. I'll get to that one person later. That was the ribbon cutting. You see a very relieved mayor on one side. The person to my other side is Jim Buchan. He moved back to New York Mills because he read in the local paper, which he got in Washington, D.C., that there was this arts project going on. He moved back to find out more about it. And he said, John, I just got one question for you. Why New York Mills? I said, why not? Sign me up. He was the press secretary for the Surgeon General, C. Everett Koop. So I learned a lot about press, marketing from Jim Buchan. He worked on all of our press releases, taught me the value of storytelling and the press and media. How do you get people into an art center? New York Mills is surrounded by lakes. Break down barriers. We had a fish decoy exhibit. It was an incredibly successful opening. We had 50 different fish decoy artists, and it was an incredible reception. But when we first opened the cultural center, people wouldn't come in. And I just asked, like, what's the word on the street? There's this beautifully renovated building, but people won't come in. And the word in the street, in a small town, was, well, it costs money to get in. I said, no, it's free. So how do we switch that? So we had dollar days. So we had a local farmer who was also a primitive artist come in. We paired that artist with a non-objective artist from France, and it was dollar days. So we had free hot dog, Coke, and we would pay you $1 if you came in. So we had huge amounts of people come in, and they wanted to look at the local artists. They also were like, what is this? These are like squares and pictures. What is this? But being Minnesota, maybe it's a little bit of Canadian nice, Minnesota nice. Only one person took the $1 because they really didn't want to, you know. So integrating the arts into the community. The tractor was the logo, symbolizing cultivating the arts. We had welcome signs that were made by elementary students. We had an impromptu parade that I was not anticipating because after these went up, students came out when their parents were picking them up, and there was a parade because each student wanted to point out the banner that they made. So you had all of these parents on Main Street looking at these welcome banners. And I like to say it took 6 years for the tractor going on the water tower to be somebody else's idea. But that's how it happened. And we did hear one person grumbling, well, there's that gosh darn arts thing on the water tower. Person was so convinced that the tractor represented art, they forgot it was a tractor. This is a rural community. I thought that was really something. So again, I battled a lot with, I think, 4 different economic developers in New York Mills. One of my big battles was trying to convince them not to move the whole town to the highway. There's a highway that goes right on the outskirts of town. The economic developer wanted to move the town business by business to the highway. Thought it was a great idea. Well, we're going to have a fast food place right in the corner of town. People can come, get their food, get their gas, and be gone. Isn't that great? People were nodding like sheep. Yes! I said, never shoot down an idea unless you have a positive alternative. So I said, well, what about this scenario? What if, instead of stopping in a fast food place and being on your way, someone saw a sculpture park with maybe the world's largest art tractor, got interested in what was going on, stopped, oh, there's some signage to go into town. They have supper at the local cafe. They stay overnight at the B&B, spend money in the community, and then go on their way. Which one sounds better? Oh, we like the one where people spend money and time in the community. So the city actually commissioned a 900-foot long sculpture fence. I presented it as, well, you have to take down the barbed wire and do something, so why not this? So the city actually commissioned this. They weren't really thinking that they were going to commission it, but it was a community-oriented project. We invited community members to create their own corn cob, self-portrait through corn. We involved kids, we involved the community, we invited national sculptors. We partnered with a sculpture park to have the first sculptures actually in the New York Mills Sculpture Park. And that's the world's largest art tractor that was made by a farmer in Minnesota who woke up one day and made a big, huge metal foot. 66 years old, he decided he was an artist, and so we commissioned him to make this art tractor. He had welded grain elevators, so all of his pieces were made of like 1 foot to 2 foot square sections. That's the only way he knew how to make things, and so this was created from that. Access to the arts, why not access to philosophy? Created something called the Great American Think-Off, which our board of directors thought was just crazy. The Chamber of Commerce thought I was insane, but you're going to have this philosophy competition in a small town. People are going to pay money to hear people talk about philosophy. I said, yes. Not only that, we're going to charge $50 for front row seats. It's going to be a fundraiser, and we're going to get national attention. Sure. Well, sure enough, the very first year we did it, we got national and international attention. We lobbied for 3 years with a postcard campaign to C-SPAN to cover it live. And after 3 years, they finally said, stop with the postcards, we're going to cover it. And they covered it 3 years running. And so this philosophy of weaving arts into the fabric of the community, does it work? Does it really have an economic benefit? Thanks to our naysaying economic developer, we were able to track that. And so the year after the Cultural Center opened, that same survey came back with 68% of people thought it was a good idea for the city to give money to the project, and then the city gave money annually to the Cultural Center, which now is a tourist information center as well. 17, the number of new businesses that opened or relocated to New York Mills in the 5 years after the Cultural Center opened. Increasing jobs 40%. Maybe you're wondering, well, what about 10, 20 years later? What happened to the population? Did it go down? What happened? 20 years later, the population increased 27%. Happy coincidence. In 2010, the National Endowment for the Arts mentioned New York Mills, along with cities like Chicago and Philadelphia, as one of the inspirations behind the Our Town initiative. I actually talked with a researcher from the NEI, I didn't know it at the time, about creative placemaking, and they were very interested in those economic stats from New York Mills, which we were able to provide. And so some of the lessons learned from New York Mills were just ingredients for success. Vision, what's the big picture? What are the principles behind the work that you're doing? Creativity, creative problem solving. That's perhaps the most important one for me, because that's that glass half full, half empty, looking at things in a positive lens. Strategy, doing your homework, taking away those reasons to say no. And then that will, determination, but also patience, knowing when to listen, knowing when to wait. And then from Jim Buchan, that presentation. What's the story? What's the pitch? How do you turn the Great American Think-Off into something truly amazing that brings people to the community to help create that upward spiral of success? Then I heard about this other community called Lanesboro. I heard that they wanted to build this new art center, and I thought, well, maybe that would be a good place to move to. It was even smaller, 754 people, but they had a river that went through it for fishing. So I thought, okay, well, maybe this is going to work because there's this great trout stream there, and I wanted to do something different and to see how another community approached it. They were an up-and-coming tourism-based community, but it was just starting. There were arts organizations there. In fact, 3 arts organizations. That was the Commonwealth Theater, that was the Lanesboro Art Council, which had been there since 1980, the very first arts organization that actually spun off the theater and the Cornucopia Art Center. I got the job as director of the Cornucopia Art Center. That's the main street in Lanesboro, Minnesota. But I realized as soon as I got there, like, wait a minute, this new art center, they want to put everything in one building. They want to have a theater, they want to have the gallery, they want to put everything into one building. And I just realized I'd spent the past 13 years doing the exact opposite of that. So I was in a bit of a conundrum, and I thought, well, what about something different? So you see a bike trail, you see B&Bs, you see the historic dam that's in the community. I'll get back to that a little bit later, because the dam is in danger of collapsing. It's built in 1868, helps provide power to the community. Then you see a trout fisherman right in the river, which is awesome fishing, by the way. But again, that was the challenge. All arts activities in one building. I just thought, again, I just spent so much of my life doing the opposite of that. What would be a different way to do this? I thought, well, what if the whole town was the art center? That's pretty much what I was trying to do in New York Mills. What if we did that? So again, the existing vision, move everything into one building. It's traditional. There's nothing wrong with that. This happens all over the place. That's fine. But there's limited access, and there's no promotion of walkability. Lanesboro is very hilly. It's also landlocked by bluffs. So what about something new? What if the whole town becomes an arts center or an arts campus? Be a new model, promote more accessible, promotes walkability and their interconnectedness of the arts. So I went to our board of directors at Cornucopia. I went to the board of directors of the Commonwealth Theater, and I went to the board of directors of the Art Council, saying, I think maybe we should merge our organizations. This arts campus could really be a way to strengthen the community, move it forward in quantum leaps. And all 3 organizations just responded unanimously. It wasn't even close. Even my own organization, no, we really want everything to be in one building. And after this morning's presentation, I realized I just had my watermelon hippo moment. I just broke my own rules. I just came into a community and proposed change right away. And I broke my own rules. How could I? Well, that's how it works sometimes. That, okay, what do you do? Well, of course you do it anyway. You just do it a lot slower, and you invite the community to participate, right? So you cultivate partnerships, build collaborations, work with the chamber, work with the city, develop shared visions and goals, not just some idea that I have, and weave the arts into the fabric of the community, and to reimagine. So I want you to take a second to reimagine. If you could just think in your head of a stained glass tractor. I want everyone to think, close your eyes, think of a stained glass tractor. That was a long lunch, lots going on today. Is everyone visualizing a stained glass tractor? Okay, open your eyes. No, stained glass tractor. This is a local artist, Carl Unash. He moved away from the community, got his MFA, decided he was going to move back to the community, and does public art. When I told him you could do stained glass and be a macho artist at the same time, when he combined those, it was absolute magic. Now he does public arts commissions all over the world. He lives right outside of Lanesboro, Minnesota. Again, one of the first things that I did was join what would become the chamber. There wasn't a chamber. There was actually something called ACT, which was Agricultural, Commerce, and Tourism. And it was kind of loosely associated. They had a very, very part-time director. I joined the board. I said, well, why don't you just become a chamber? Be much more civic oriented. You could work on community promotion, tourism, and you wouldn't be called ACT. People wouldn't join ACT because they thought it was the theater. And they already joined the theater, so why would they join two theaters? So once we convinced them to become a chamber of commerce, to really look at the civic nature of the community, of course, then they made me president of the chamber, so that's just goes hand in hand with a small town. But part of what the chamber does and did was promote the community. So the arts community promotes the community, the chamber promotes the community, the city promotes the community, individual businesses promote it. Each has a different tact. The chamber often promotes the tourism part, the scenic beauty. The arts organizations promote the arts. We have something called Rhubarb Festival, which was started by the Rhubarb Sisters, which is a musical group not unlike the Andrew Sisters, but you just substitute just about any word for rhubarb, like bebop-a-looba, my baby, bebop-a-looba, my rhubarb. So anyway, it goes on and on. They lobbied for 2 years, Garrison Keillor, to have his radio show, A Prairie Home Companion, done from Lanesboro. They actually showed up at the Fitzgerald Theater all wearing rhubarb stalks, and that finally got him, okay, stop with the rhubarb. He loved rhubarb. He did a live show in Lanesboro from the softball field. It was totally amazing. 4,000 people packed into a ball field to watch Prairie Home Companion. Again, one of our partners was the city. One of the things that the community did in the early 2000s was asset mapping. We had a town hall forum to identify different priorities in the community, and the arts just bubbled to the surface. And I was there to listen. And one of the things that the city identified was a need for signage. And so the signs you see right there are for visitors and locals. They're for locals in the sense that locals would just get tired of telling visitors the theater's over here, that something else is over here, that's where the dam is. So they commissioned an artist to do custom signs that would be more reflective of the character and authenticity of the community. And they hired Carl Unash, who's the same artist who did the tractor, to do community signs. And so part of partnering with the city was also looking at how can the arts help solve community challenges, not problems. Everyone knows what the problems are. What are some of the challenges? That was one. Discover, Sculpture, Explore Lanesboro. It was an idea of, well, if the whole town is an arts campus, how do you get people to explore it, but also learn about the history? We worked with the town historian, Don Ward, in the local history museum to look at what's the history of the community. So we had 5 major medallions, each representing a different part of the community. So we had history and culture, we had nature, we had education, and community members had a chance to have their own object that represented that different part. This was the outdoors, so you see a fish right there, a trout. And so people were able to actually put their own items into these medallions, and they're placed strategically around the community to promote walkability. So literally, you would discover sculpture as you were exploring the community of Lanesboro, town as arts campus. One of the most successful exhibits I've ever been a part of was one that started off on the wrong foot. One of the biggest employers in the community is the Lanesboro Sales Commission. It's a livestock auction. So people in the arts community really didn't know that much about it. And people at the sales barn really didn't know that much about the arts, and that's okay. I thought, well, why should that be? Let's have a collaboration. Let's have a partnership. So I talked with the owner, said, hey, we want to do an exhibit honoring the hard work that you guys do in the community. What do you say? Nope. 1 month later, nope. One more time, no. I said, well, maybe I'm not the best person to ask this. So I went to my friend Julia and said, you've been here your whole life. Do you know Joe who owns this? Oh, I'll be happy to have a conversation with him. Well, it turns out he thought we were going to do some kind of expose on cattle and what they were doing. And I said, no, we want to do the exact opposite. We just want to send photographers in to do snapshots of what it is you people really do and how hard you work to show both sides what's going on, that communication thing. Well, that sounds like a great idea. So they allowed photographers into the inner workings of the sales commission. We had 4 different regional photographers as part of the show. It was sponsored by the Minnesota Beef Council and the Fillmore County Cattlemen's Association, who grilled out the free steaks that the Beef Council donated in front of the gallery. Local pub donated a keg of beer. We had over 300 people attend the opening for this event. But to me, one of the most impactful things was the owner of the sales commission came in, didn't say much during the event. Robbie, who's the gallery director, came up to me and said, we sold a photograph. I said, oh yeah, who? That person over there. It was Joe Nelson, who owned the sales commission. He bought his first piece of art ever. Creating a shared vision. When I heard the city and the chamber were reworking their strategic plans, be at the table. We were at the table. The arts were already a part of the community, but once the arts were integrated into city and civic strategic plans, it was also conscious in future funding efforts and just in the narrative of the community. And that was a real turning point, I think, for the arts. It's just being matter-of-factly written into strategic plans. And again, it wasn't until 2008 where the idea of the arts campus came up again. And it was someone from the community and the Art Council who said, you know, what about this arts campus idea? I said, well, that's a really good idea. I'm glad you thought of it. Let's have a conversation about that. So again, the Cornucopia Art Center, we had paid staff, didn't own any assets. The Art Council, no paid staff, but owned a theater. It had 100 volunteers. Wow, what if that synergy could happen together? What would that look like? So we began a conversation in 2008. It was a 2-year conversation. We had joint board meetings, but we put it to a vote to members of both organizations. And in 2010, it was unanimous. All members of both arts organizations voted yes. If you live in a small town, having something unanimous is pretty tough, but it was very matter of fact. And we changed the name of Cornucopia to Lanesboro Arts. Part of that's just branding. Lanesboro was becoming a national arts town. Why not have a name that reflects that and take advantage of that free publicity? So done, right? You've done the merger, ready to go. You've done all that work. So what do you do right when there's a huge recession? Well, of course, you undertake a $1 million capital campaign. That's what you do. And that's what we did. And our tagline for the campaign was building a new vision for the arts. What does that look like? I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know what an arts campus looked like. So we asked the community. We did a fundraising campaign, but we didn't just ask people for money. We asked for their ideas. And that was far more impactful. So they told their stories. We had open meetings. We had meetings after meetings after meetings, all to make sure every single person in the community could participate. We gave a presentation to the school. They had a school assembly, especially for this presentation, of what an arts campus could look like and what students valued about their community, what they thought their assets were. And it was pretty amazing that the students and the adults had a lot of overlap in areas that they agreed on in terms of having a town that's still authentic, having something that doesn't change immediately, but that appreciates the history and culture of the community, including the arts. So with support from the National Endowment for the Arts and Art Place America, we hired a fantastic design firm to help the community identify those assets. And this is a very detailed vision plan, but it was all with community input, including the dam as a priority, the Gateway Park, the whole walkability of the community was now something that the community was embracing and had a part in the design of. Part of those designs also was looking at how do we preserve our downtown? How do we have historic guidelines? So our organization, in order to write a grant for the St. Main Theater, the prerequisite to that was having design standards. So we actually paid or helped fund design standards for the entire community. So this is an example of the only 3-story building in Lanesboro. And you can see that before, the owner really had a penchant for inflatables. So he really liked green things, and at Christmas, he had the Christmas stuff. He ended up selling it to a farmer who from Fountain, which is the neighboring town over from Lanesboro, they were in Ireland, saw an Irish pub, and wanted to open a pub. So a farmer bought this from the owner and turned it into an Irish-style pub right in Lanesboro. And he asked, it's like, you know, John, we want to have live music, but we don't want to compete with what you're doing at the St. Main. And I said, are you kidding me? That's awesome. Of course do live music. That's not going to compete at all. That's going to help even more establish Lanesboro as an arts community. So they're one of our big partners now. So when we have our Over the Back Fence radio show, often our performers will then, after the show, go to the pub and perform. And again, what are components of an arts campus? They're buildings that house the arts, they're pedestrian walkways, and they're arts and public spaces, all working together. Again, one of our components that we raised money for was the St. Main Theater, which now is an artist residency center. Also, our historic gallery building, which serves over 100 artists. Getting to a community challenge. What does a parking lot have to do with an arts campus? Well, one of the challenges of the community was that Lanesboro has a 2-block Main Street. You saw it on that opening slide. Everyone who visits Lanesboro wants to park in that 2-block area, and it just can't be done. Meanwhile, there's a city parking lot as you drive into the community that people don't park in. And so downtown businesses were upset because someone would park there all day who was doing a canoe ride, and they can't sell stuff if there's no place to park. Well, it seems like a no-brainer to do something, but well, why not turn the parking lot itself into an arts destination? Instead of just housing canoes for the outfitters in town, what if people actually parked there? What would you do? What would that look like? Well, what if you turn it into a poetry parking lot? So part of our NEA grant was to do a poetry series and have a competition to have local and regional poets do poetry about the region. And so we had poets as young as 13 do poetry that represented the region and created on one side downtown parking, so as you're driving down the road you know that's downtown parking, and then poetry on the inside. And this is an example of the poetry. But it had to be designed with the authentic nature of the community in mind. And one of the best compliments we got was one of those naysayers came up and said, well, you know, it looks like those were there the whole time. That's okay. Kind of shuffle along, that's all he said. And so part of making that more attractive to the community and to visitors was to have an information kiosk. There's no information kiosk to the community. So now in the parking lot, you can find out, well, one, this is where you park, but also, oh, what are the upcoming events in the community? But how do you get there? You have to walk underneath the, yep, another community challenge. This was the historic walking bridge in the community. And one of the first projects that I worked on, again, with that same person, Julia, who worked with Joe Nelson, I worked with her on a campaign to restore this historic walking bridge, which was almost falling down. Raised over $100,000 locally and did a bond referendum for the citizens to raise their own taxes to fund this project. And it passed by a 70% margin. As part of the Arts Campus, we also then partnered with the local History Center, a history museum, which really came alive once we started the Arts Campus initiative. It's like, well, could the history fit into this? Is that okay? Of course it's okay. The answer is yes, absolutely. In fact, we'll try to help get you an intern for the History Museum. Awesome. So we created signage as part of the Arts Campus. So this is the restored walking bridge with signage that now connects to the parking lot. So you can park in the parking lot, walk underneath the underpass to a beautiful walking bridge that gets you to downtown, and you can do the loop. Engaging young people. Our organization has an internship program, so really a learning organization, and we don't just give them things like stuff envelopes. We have them do real projects, real grant writing, and engage in the community. So this year we actually have 3 interns. One of our former staff members who was instrumental in our capital campaign got hired away, not in the area of arts. She got hired by an economic development agency in the region, and she's doing community and economic development. One of our board members, who's also in their 20s, got hired away to do economic development as well, not in the arts field. But I think it's really important to have young people engaged in the community and to continue working in the community, and that's how you can get people to move back to a community. Recent community challenge, again, is the historic Lanesboro Dam. It also helps provide power for the community, but literally it could collapse just about at any time. It's one of only 6 like it left in the nation. It's a gravity dam, provides power for the community. The community could not afford its renovation. So I thought, well, is there any way the arts could help with this? How is that even possible? Well, what if we did an arts exhibit? What if we had a national collaboration, say with the Smithsonian? We heard about an exhibit called Waterways, instantly tried to get that exhibit to come to Lanesboro so that we could get letters of support from our 2 Republican politicians who are not necessarily in support of the arts, but we got them to support this Waterways project and have a line in that letter of support that also supported the dam. So now they were on record supporting the dam, which turned out to be very crucial. So not only was this national exhibit great for the community of Lanesboro, putting it in a national spotlight, we also did a local companion exhibit as well. So again, we worked with the local history museum to have historic photos, and we had local and regional artists reimagine what those photos would be. And it was really incredible. Part of our project as well was something called the Youth Access Technology Project. We had 3 different community members who were all, they ranged in age from 13 to 17. As part of this project, they did different videos about the community. They had never done a video before, they had never done interviews, anything like it. And we were one of 6 organizations in the country to get this grant. And in the process of doing this video work of the community, one was on the arts and the tourism industry, the other was on farming and agriculture, and the other was on the trail. And so each had different unique perspectives. They interviewed people that I would never be able to talk with, including politicians, about how the community came to be and their roles in it. And it was fascinating to see 3 young people literally change before our eyes as an organization, and to create 3 different films that are now on the Museum on Main Street website. The Smithsonian actually changed their guidelines for the project because of what Lanesboro was doing. So these films weren't 2 minutes, they were up to 18 minutes. And these films by these amazing students are actually on the Smithsonian Stories from Main Street website. So if you Google Smithsonian Museum on Main Street, you can see some of these films about Lanesboro. Again, the Arts Campus, as an idea, has gotten national attention. We've done presentations all over the country about the concept of a town as art center. In 2013, Lanesboro was named one of the top 12 small town art places in America. Again, we received funding from both the NEA and Art Place America. We received a Bush Prize for community innovation, and that innovation was the idea that a whole town could be an arts campus. And in 2014, we completed a $1 million capital campaign for the Lanesboro Arts Campus. 130,000, that was the number of gallery sales we had in our exhibition gallery for last year. Audience members served from Lanesboro Arts, 30,000 in 1 year. 300, the number of artists that we've served in 1 year. 150, the number of volunteers we've engaged in the past year. In September of 2014, the Lanesboro City Council passed a resolution declaring the whole town an arts campus. That happened because of one of our employees said, "John, you're forgetting the most important thing about this project." I said, "What is that?" "The resolution. Remember you talked about that 5 years ago." I said, "Oh yeah." So I put together a resolution, ran it by the city administrator and the mayor, and it was no big deal. It passed unanimously. It took 5 minutes. They didn't realize what they'd just done. Other communities from around the country started calling after this, including Nashville, saying, "How did you get your council to do this, and can we see the resolution?" I said, "No, it's more of just a concept. It's an idea. There's no real substance there," but they wanted to see it because they wanted to see how they could integrate Nashville, the city of Nashville, more arts into their entire community. So you're wondering, did this really have any economic impact? This collaboration, these community workshops, the visioning, did it have an economic impact? So in 2015, an interesting thing happened. The Chamber of Commerce had a ribbon cutting for some new businesses. 10 new businesses opened in 2015 in Lanesboro, in a 2-block downtown. $2.5 million were invested in historic renovations in downtown Lanesboro. That number has since gone up. That's since the Arts Campus Initiative started. Some interesting coincidences happen sometimes. We track that data as well. Brings us to this year. Could an art exhibit and that kind of work in partnership with the Smithsonian and engaging young people in the community, could that really have an impact with a historic dam? Just last month, the state legislature passed their bonding amendment, which included $4 million for the restoration of the Lanesboro Dam. See, I really believe that the arts have the power to strengthen communities and transform communities if you have those conversations, if you listen, if you take the time. Thank you.